Monsoon rain poured out of the leaden grey sky. It hammered down, bouncing back off the concrete and soaking the shoes of the people who scurried through the thunderous downpour, cowering under umbrellas that shone wetly in every color of the rainbow. Toshi pulled the hood of his jacket tighter around his face, bitterly regretting that he'd not remembered his umbrella when he left home that morning. He was drenched, soaked to the skin, his socks squelched in shoes that brimmed with dirty water. And he was late home. His mother would kill him when he finally got back. If only he hadn't lingered so long after school to fool around with the new girl, Akira, something like that. He might have avoided this torrential rain. Toshi smiled ruefully to himself. It had been worth it. He was getting nowhere fast, trying to battle through the rush-hour crowds like this. He could take a shortcut through the district behind the fish market. His mother had forbidden Toshi from taking that route home, through the rough part of town. He checked his watch. It was getting very late. He made a snap decision, veering right out of the flowing stream of pedestrians. He splashed through puddles that reflected the lurid neon glow of the street signs above, then ducked down a side street. His mother didn't need to know which way he'd come home. It was worth the risk to get back quickly before she panicked and called the police. He would take the shortcut. What's the worst thing that could happen? The Slit-Mouthed Woman. A bite-sized fright. This series contains disturbing content. Listener discretion is advised. Toshi walked alone through the rain. The dark, narrow streets around him were utterly devoid of life, apart from a few scavenging rats that disappeared into the shadows as he approached. Water poured down from the clogged guttering above boarded-up shop fronts and grimy apartment buildings. Toshi huddled into his jacket. It was clammy and cold, soaked through by the rain. He was beginning to regret this decision. He turned a corner and slowed, mouth suddenly dry. There was a dark figure standing halfway down the narrow street, motionless under a black umbrella. Toshi's heart beat a little faster. This was a bad neighborhood, a hangout for local gangs. The skin on his arms prickled. Something wasn't right. Every fiber of his being was telling him to turn, to run. But it would be absurd to go back now. He was so close to home. Toshi continued forward, shivering in his drenched clothes. The figure remained utterly still. Rain cascaded in miniature waterfalls from the edges of the umbrella. There was a startling flash of lightning from the storm above, briefly illuminating the street with stark brilliance. Toshi breathed a sigh of relief. He had seen clearly the person under the umbrella. It was a woman, young and slim, wearing a long brown coat and gloves. He felt the knot of apprehension in his stomach ease somewhat, and he stood a little straighter, putting a touch of that schoolyard cockiness that the girls loved back into his stride. Thunder grumbled angrily overhead. As he drew closer, Toshi could see that the woman had wonderfully long hair, hanging in a silken curtain down to her waist, and shining black like wet coal. Most of her face was covered by a surgical mask, not at all uncommon in this city, used to keep out the smog and pollution. But above the mask, her eyes were huge, soft and almost luminously green. Toshi couldn't remember ever having seen eyes so beautiful, so hypnotic. He stumbled closer. The woman made no attempt to move to let him pass. She stood still and silent. The only sound was that of the relentless rain, drumming on her black umbrella. "Do you think I'm beautiful?" the woman suddenly asked in a soft, almost musical voice. What? Toshi stammered. He was lost in those huge, emerald eyes. He was so close he could smell her perfume, something delicate and floral. Her skin was pale, smooth and flawless, like a china doll. "Do you think I'm beautiful?" the woman asked again. Was it Toshi's imagination, or did she seem suddenly taller? He looked at her face. How could he know if she was beautiful, hidden away as she was under that mask? Those eyes, and that shimmering curtain of hair. Yes, he breathed. His heart was suddenly thundering in his chest. She was definitely taller than he had first thought. She suddenly seemed to be towering over him, but that couldn't be right. Very slowly, the woman raised one gloved hand to her face. With delicate fingers, she unhooked the straps of her mask and peeled it away. Toshi's blood froze in his veins. The woman's mouth was a hideous, gaping maw. 2 ragged wounds curled away from the corners of her lips, opening her face into a grotesque, lopsided parody of a smile. It looked as though someone had tried to cut her head in 2. "How about now?" the woman asked, her mangled face contorting horribly. Her voice was a rasping croak. The smell of perfume was gone, replaced with the rotting stench of something long dead. Toshi glanced up, tearing his gaze away from that terrible, yawning mouth, and saw that the woman's beautiful eyes had melted away. In their place, 2 blank, icy orbs rolled madly in raw, blackened pits. Toshi turned and ran. He sprinted down the narrow street, splashing through oily puddles while frightened tears mixed with the rain on his cheeks. At the end of the alleyway, he risked a glance back over his shoulder. That woman hadn't moved. She loomed, impossibly tall in the middle of the street, half hidden behind the hissing sheets of water that poured from the sky. Toshi veered left, hurtling down a side street past gloomy tenement buildings and overflowing garbage bags. The torrential rain stung his face with 1,000 tiny needles, but he didn't care. He took a right, then another left, weaving blindly through the maze of shabby apartment blocks, trying to put as much distance between himself and that nightmare as he possibly could. He turned another corner and stopped dead in his tracks. There she was, 100 yards ahead, a rain-blurred silhouette under black umbrella, blocking his path. This was madness. There was no way she could have gotten ahead of him. Toshi backpedaled, feet sliding on the slick concrete. The woman began to run, straight at him, closing the distance impossibly fast. She loped with long, inhuman strides, seeming almost to glide forward through the rain. In a heartbeat, she was on top of him. Her gloved hand, unnaturally strong, seized the front of Toshi's jacket and pulled him close to that terrible, ruined face. Her other hand slid into the pocket of her coat and pulled out a pair of huge, rusted scissors. She snipped at the air with them. The blades shrieked against each other an inch from Toshi's nose. "How about now?" the woman rasped. Her long hair billowed and curled in a non-existent wind, writhing like black snakes. "Do you think I'm beautiful?" Foul, carrion breath washed over Toshi. He stared up into her face. That hideous, ragged mouth was yawning, gaping wide enough to swallow him whole, it seemed. "Yes," he choked. "Yes. Yes, I do." The woman smiled widely. Her lips peeled back from her slack, red mouth, which was suddenly filled with rows of jagged, needle-like teeth. Her scissors flashed once, twice. Toshi's screams echoed through the dark, rain-washed streets. The boy stumbled out onto the main road. The hurrying crowds jostled him from side to side until he collapsed, face down in a puddle. A group of concerned onlookers gathered around, shielding him from the rain under a circle of multicolored umbrellas. One man knelt to turn the boy over. He recoiled with a strangled gasp. The boy's face was a ruined, pulpy mess of meat. Blood gushed over his chin and trickled down to stain the puddle's dark red. The crowd stared down at the boy in silent horror. He grinned back at them, mouth sliced wide into an eternal smile. In 1979, fear spread like wildfire through the cities of Japan. It started in Nagasaki, where school children began reporting sightings of Kuchisake Onna, an evil spirit that takes the form of a woman with a hideous, slit mouth, hidden under a white mask. The children said that the woman waited for them in the shadows of telegraph poles down lonely, deserted roads. Stray too close, and the Kuchisake Onna would appear in front of you and ask, "Do you think I'm beautiful?" If you answered no, then the slit-mouthed woman would butcher you on the spot with a long knife, or scissors, or a machete. If you replied with yes, the woman would remove her mask, revealing her terrifying, mutilated face before asking her question again. Answer no, and you would be cut in half with a single blow. Answer yes, and she would carve your face to match her own. The rumors and sightings quickly spread, soon creating panic throughout the country. Such was the hysteria around the slit-mouthed woman that before long children were being escorted home from school by their parents and teachers. The police even got involved, setting additional patrols to search for the mysterious, masked monster. They believed they were dealing with a vicious psychopath, hell-bent on murdering a child. The children themselves, however, were convinced that the spirit of Kuchisake Onna was real. Rumors began to emerge of how to survive an encounter with the slit-mouthed woman. You could possibly buy time to escape by giving vague answers to her questions, or by describing her appearance as average. Some said it was possible to distract the Kuchisake Onna by throwing money or hard candies at her feet and running while she scrabbled to pick them up. Some believed that if you answered yes to both her questions, she would let you live. Others claimed that this was only a trick, and that she would appear in your house later that evening and slaughter you in your sleep. By the end of 1979, the hysteria had begun to fade. Slowly the stories and sightings of the slit-mouthed woman disappeared, like memories of a bad dream. But she was not gone forever. As Kuchisake Onna became solidified into urban legend, rumored sightings sprang up across East Asia, most recently in South Korea in 2004. Here, many people reported seeing a pale woman with long, dark hair, this time wearing a blood-red mask, stalking children in the darkness. It is difficult to pinpoint the true origin of the legend of the slit-mouthed woman. In some versions, she is the vengeful spirit of someone who was accidentally mutilated during a botched dental or medical procedure. In others, she is an escaped patient from a mental asylum whose hideous wounds are self-inflicted. Rumors spread that she was the ghost of a crazed child murderer. This version gained popularity when a coroner reportedly discovered police documents from the early 1970s detailing the death of a woman who had been seen chasing small children. She had been hit by a car, the autopsy later revealing that the impact had torn her face open, from ear to ear. One recurring theme in these urban legends is that Kuchisake Onna is astonishingly beautiful, before she reveals her true form, and that perhaps she was purposefully disfigured in life by another woman, jealous of her great beauty. This idea chimes with the most popular story about the origins of the slit-mouthed woman, which some historians believe dates back to over 300 years ago. There was once a great samurai, a powerful warrior famed for his fighting skills, but also for his arrogance. When it came time for him to take a wife, only the best would do. The samurai married the most beautiful woman in all the land. Her hair flowed like black silk, her skin smooth and white as cream. They lived together happily enough for a while. But soon the samurai was called to war, leaving his lovely bride behind. Days became weeks, became months. The woman began to feel very lonely. Before she had married the samurai, she had been courted by many other rich and powerful men. She was not used to being alone, ignored. And why should she be? She was the most beautiful woman in all Japan, wasn't she? Before long, she began a string of illicit affairs, each of her lovers more wealthy or influential than the last. Rumors began to spread, finally reaching the ears of her husband on his long march back home. The samurai heard the stories from a friend. There was a woman of unnatural beauty who would take only the most powerful men as her lovers. "I must meet this woman," the samurai declared. "No man is more powerful than I. She will not be able to resist me." He demanded that his friend take him to meet this promiscuous woman at once. As they journeyed, the samurai's surroundings became more and more familiar. He began to feel a little uneasy. When his friend led them to a townhouse with a tall red door, the samurai felt an icy hand grasp his heart. "Impossible," he growled. "This is my house." The samurai burst through the door to find his wife in the loving embrace of another man. With an incoherent roar of rage, he drew his sword and plunged it into the stranger's back. The blade emerged from the man's chest in a spurting crimson fountain. The samurai's wife screamed, leaping aside as her lover toppled forwards, choking on his own blood. She turned and tried to flee, but the samurai seized her around the neck with one strong arm and pulled her close. "So," he snarled in her ear, "you think yourself beautiful." Quick as a snake, he raised his bloodied sword and placed the flat of the blade into his wife's open, screaming mouth. He yanked the sword sideways, splitting her face from ear to ear. "Well, let's see who will think you beautiful now." Kuchisaki Onna, the Slit-Mouthed Woman, is an example of an onri, a malevolent spirit that cannot find peace, and so seeks vengeance upon the living. There are many onri said to stalk the dark places of Japan, resulting in some truly horrifying urban legends. Hanako-san is said to haunt school bathrooms. She is the spirit of a young girl, murdered by her father or a violent stranger, or killed playing hide-and-seek during a World War II air raid. In some versions of the tale, Hanako-san committed suicide in the third stall of a school bathroom after suffering prolonged bullying. She can be heard talking or giggling to herself in out-of-order cubicles, though no feet will be visible beneath the door. Similar to the Western legend of Bloody Mary, Hanako-san can be summoned by standing very close to her stall door, knocking 3 times and asking, "Are you there, Hanako-san?" Those brave enough to attempt this may be rewarded by a small, slow voice from behind the closed door. "Yes, I am." They may also see a ghostly, blood-stained hand creep out towards them, or catch a glimpse of the pale, childlike Hanako-san through a crack in the door. In some versions of the legend, Hanako-san may drag those who summoned her into the stall and butcher them, or pull them down into the toilet, which has become a portal to some hellish underworld. Then there is Akomanto, a demonic spirit that also haunts public bathrooms. According to legend, Akomanto appears before young women using the bathroom alone in the dead of night, wearing a flowing cloak and sinister, blank-faced mask. He will demand that you choose a color, red or blue. Select red, and Akomanto will skin you alive and leave your blood-drenched corpse in a bathroom stall. Choose blue, and you will be strangled to death, all the blood drained from your body, leaving behind a cold, blue husk. In some forms of the tale, it is possible to escape from Akomanto by choosing a different color, or by running for the door. However, in most, Any attempt to escape will result in you being dragged screaming into the bathroom stall by Akomanto's assistant, the ghost child, Hanako-san. Perhaps the most horrifying of all is the story of Teke Teke. She is said to be the spirit of a young woman cut in half by a train after falling on a railway line. She appears as the upper half of a rotting corpse with bulging white eyes and long dark hair, dragging her legless torso over the ground on hands and elbows. Teke Teke haunts railway stations and subway platforms, emerging from the darkness to prey on lonesome travelers, waiting for the last train. They will hear her coming, the slow, wet scraping of her shattered body as she crawls from the shadows. When she suddenly gives chase, she runs on her hands, long nails rasping on the ground, making a hideous tick-tick-tick sound, from which the spirit takes her name. In some versions of her legend, Teke Teke also haunts public bathrooms, slithering across the tiled floor and peering under cubicle doors, asking the occupants if they know where her legs are. Fail to answer satisfactorily, and Teke Teke will tear your own legs off, or slice you in half with a scythe. While these ghostly Japanese tales are nightmarish in their own right, none have come close to creating the kind of panicked fear caused by the Slit-Mouthed Woman in the 1970s. What do you think? Was Kuchiseki Onna real? Did she really lurk in the shadows of telephone poles, waiting to carve children's faces into permanent, bloody smiles? Or was she just the figment of millions of imaginations? Mass hysteria on a national scale, fueled by scary stories. We will never know for certain. But, to be on the safe side, do take care when walking home alone at night. And if a mysterious, beautiful woman asks you a question, be sure to think carefully before you answer. We would love to hear your own thoughts and ideas about these fearful urban legends. Do let us know if you have encountered similar supernatural horrors, and how you lived to tell the tale. If you have enjoyed this episode, please follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Pixel Elixir, and subscribe at bitesizedfrights.com to make sure that you never miss any of our terrifying tales. This has been a Pixel Elixir production, narrated by Chris K. Thank you for listening. Until the next bite, my friends.